Okay, we'll start the meeting now. Again, namaste. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm sure we've been joining from different locations, and this is our seventh quarterly meeting as part of our Global Coalition initiative, which is basically the initiative started with the objective to create. Uh, Create a platform, a common platform where people can share their share their best practices vis-a-vis sexuality education, child safety, and about gender equity. And we wanted to create this platform where different organizations and individuals can come on the same platform and talk about different um, the languages, the uniform languages that have been used, the best practices that they have been incorporating in their own spaces. And right now we have more than 1,000 members from 32 countries. So we're really happy that, so many of you have joined us in this mission. And together we are creating a space which is safe and respectful for children. So today, as part of this initiative, we always try to have conversations about topics which are not usually spoken in the in the normative society or spaces. Usually, largely some conversations which are ignored or silenced. So today we are exploring what does it mean to explore sexuality, identity, and relationship when the world does not even expect you to have those feelings just simply because you have a disability. So, through this space, it's a tiny effort from our end to shift that silence. And as we go on to do that, I want to share a snippet of an article, an expression piece that is being sent by a person with disability. So, I'll just quickly share that expression piece to set the tone right for this conversation. This expression piece is shared by Anchal. She says, as a teenager with low vision, navigating sexuality, identity, and social belonging felt like landing in a fog while watching everyone else move with clarity and ease. I found it nearly impossible to pursue friendships and romantic relationships with ease. I anticipated rejection before it could happen. I apologized for my presence before anyone even complained. Even today in group photographs, if I appear at the margin of the frame, partially I cut off or slightly blurred, I spiral into overthinking. It becomes a metaphor. Am I truly included or just tolerated? This hyper awareness isn't vanity, it's a residue of chronic exclusion. And this absence isn't just in literature or media, it's in school corridors, and it in crushes never returned, in the silence of not being seen as a romantic possibility. And there is both grief and grace in this journey. Grief for the years spent trying to earn belonging, and grace in the moments I allow myself to rest in relationships without performance. And for many of us, the desire to be dependable and the craving to be dependent on are not contradictions. They're co survivors of a life spent learning how to exist in a world that was not built for us. On that note, I will introduce the moderator of this panel discussion today, Chitra Shah. Chitra has over 3 decades of experience in the development sector and 2 decades in disability. Chitra is also the founder and director of Sata Special School, a center for children with intellectual disabilities, which is based out of Pondicherry, South India. And her vision is reaching the unreached and including the excluded. Over to you, Chitra.
Thank you so much, Sanjana, and a very, very good evening to all. I think first, a sincere thanks to Enfold, Dr. Sangeeta and team for having brought this much hushed up, often not spoken about topic to a mainstream international media. So thank you so much for doing this. So about the topic today of understanding sexuality in adolescents with disabilities. See, generally, we know that adolescence is a very transformative period marked by physical, emotional, and social changes. But for people with disabilities, or young people with disabilities, this journey is very complex, often shaped by a lot of taboos and myths, limited access to information, and a mistaken belief that they are asexual. Conversations around sexuality and disability are frequently absent, in fact, not even existing in the part of the world where I work, second tier and third tier cities in India, completely absent both in education, in healthcare, and from family conversations. This silence actually creates barriers of self awareness, of consent, of safety, the right for a loving relationship, leaving adolescents with disabilities vulnerable, misinformed, and hence invisible. This panel that is we've that has been put up today, we seek to unpack the intersections of disability and sexuality in adolescence, addressing what the key issues and lived experiences, the why these conversations matter for both inclusion, for empowerment, and for protection and safety, and the how practical strategies for families, educators, and service providers. By centering our voices from the field and those with lived experience, we hope to challenge the stigma, the myth, the taboo, foster an open dialogue, and advocate for rights based, inclusive sexuality education that recognizes adolescents with disabilities as individuals with desires, with identities, and with the right to informed choices. So I am looking forward to a really enriching experience of learning and sharing. Adolescents with disabilities often face negative social messaging that impacts their self worth, the body confidence, internalized ableism, absorbing the belief that one is less than because of a disability compared to somebody else, which deeply affects their identity and emotional well being. Building self esteem of the person with disability or the young adolescent with disability requires representation, positive reinforcement, and environments that celebrate diverse bodies and abilities. Forming friendships and navigating romantic or sexual relationships can be challenging when we have these stereotypes that limit social interaction. Adolescents with disabilities may also struggle with social inclusion, expression of their own desires, and being taken seriously by potential partners, both able and
both able
otherwise.
and
Adolescents with disabilities, like all people, need to explore their sexual orientation, gender identity, but often they do not have access to inclusive information or role models. They face compounded stigmas or have their identities often questioned and dismissed. So, today in this panel, we want to question all these stigmas. We want to, share what it is to live with a disability, what it is to share, issues that relate to their sexuality. So, my first panelist, or first two panelists, Shane is a non binary activist and a gender equality, diversity, and social inclusion consultant. New is a trans disabled non binary founder of the queer and disabled lead collective Revival Disabled India movement. And I welcome both of you. And here is my first question to the panelists. How do adolescents with disabilities explore their gender and identities, and what challenges do they face from the society? Maybe Shane can go on first. You have about 5 minutes, and then you can go on, and then maybe there's an additional 1 minute where we can kind of um, share some more points.
Sure. Thank you for having me here today. I also sit on the board of ILGA Asia, which is the largest LGBTIQ um, organization regionally in our region. So that's essentially a good background of what I do as the disability rep. So I think to answer this question, it would be good to basically go back to when I was younger. Um, when I was an adolescent myself, around the age of 13, 14, I was trying to figure out my own identity in terms of um, who I was as a queer person and also as a trans person. Um, and I think that compounded with the fact that I was also a neurodivergent and disabled person and a chronically ill person. A lot of my teachers and educators didn't actually understand that. Not just my educators, but coming back home and they not un like my parents don't understanding it either, right? And it's not just about my disability, but it was also about my gender identity and my sexuality. So I think it really comes down to the fact that like the support systems that are around us, whether it's through educators, whether it's through our parents, whether it's through our peers, needs to be incredibly strong. And only then it will actually allow a child or a young person to truly explore their identities um, to the point where it's actually safe and better for the entire community as a whole. Um, One of the things that I faced a lot when I was younger was when my parents would actually take me to the doctor, a lot of medical gaslighting happened because I knew what I was feeling in my core. However, there was a lot of misdirection from how I was feeling because I was a minor towards what my parents were feeling at that time, which was fear about how things are going to turn out, but also that the doctors didn't believe the amount of pain that I was in. So I think as a disabled young person, that also translate a lot into when you go to a psychiatrist or a therapist as a young person and you're like, okay, I think I'm queer or I think I'm trans, and they don't believe you either. And so when these two things happen individually, um, it affects your entire um self knowing and also how much you can actually explore who you are, right? Now, yes, the adults don't understand us, but then you go to school and then your peers don't understand you either. And how much that stops you from actually exploring yourself really affects not just the way that you perform at school, the way you perform in education, but also the way that you perform in different relationships that you hold, whether it's with adults or with your peers. And that's exactly why when Save the Children um, did a survey around mental health of LGBTIQ young people, it was actually shown that trans masculine participants had the highest rates of depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. And it's not just that, but LGBTIQ children and youth are tend to be more ridiculed than their cis and hetero counterparts. So, for example, in Thailand, in schools, 75% of LGBTIQ children and young people actually face being ridiculed, 31% face violence, 53% face sexual harassment online, and 58% face offline. So this is already a really big number. Now, compounding that with and adding the identity of disability and neurodivergence to it, this number is much higher. And why I bring up the fact that LGBTIQ is so important in the conversation of disability is because 1 in 3 disabled people also, no, sorry, 1 in 3 LGBTIQ people also identify as disabled, whether it's disabled or neurodivergent, right? Um, and this is a huge number enough for us not to make LGBTIQ a disability issue and disability and LGBTIQ issue. So I think the cross movement is so important when we're actually talking about these things, uh, just so we don't isolate the folks who are multi-marginalized in both of those identities. For example, one of the things that I faced a lot while growing up was the disability space essentially said, "Oh, we're only here to talk about disability and not your queerness. And the queer space would only say, oh, but there's no space to talk about disability because we're already too focused on other issues.
Yeah.
And so this is so important, especially as a young person who went into this space pretty early on from the age of 13, 14, 15. And I think once we open up that space a little bit more and understand how these two identities overlap, it's going to be much better for children with disabilities to understand their sexuality.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane, for sharing us your both lived experience and also what it is to be there and not have anyone to share your uh, discomforts with. Can I now have New to share your views, please?
Yes. Hello everyone. I hope I'm audible. Um, Thank you so much, Unfold India, for inviting me to this conversation. It was pretty interesting to in my preparation for the panel to go back and just look at my childhood, because for a lot of us adults who are now adults, when we grew up as disabled children, right? I grew up like a physically disabled child. A lot of us don't want to revisit our childhoods because of how traumatizing it was. And I've largely been a writer and a developmental sector professional. So it was very interesting to go back to my pieces that I published, like platforms such as Feminism in India, like just how, how I took up space within academia, and how my gender has also changed. I wrote those pieces as a disabled woman, and now I identify as trans non-binary. So, yeah, I would like to firstly thank whoever in Sanjana for inviting me to this panel, and initiating that thought. Um, when I think about adolescents and disabilities, I would definitely like to start with a um, with something that the National Education Policy of 2020 said and recognized. How it recognizes transgender students as a group facing educational access and having challenges, and includes them in a inclusion fund to promote equitable education. But it does not address the need for teacher training that includes non binary perspectives, leaving significant gaps in implementation. So, like we've often seen, there is hardly any sex education and sexuality education in schools have always been seen as very technical and clinical, and a neurodivergent child or any child, it's very complicated for them, right? So for me as well, growing up as a disabled woman, I would firstly like to start with how I used to perceive academia as a whole, because it's really important to see how disabled children exist within institutions, right? So for the longest time, I was unaware that I was even allowed to ask for accessibility within my school. And I thought that stairs, for example, were just something that I would have to deal with my entire life. Um, I had no knowledge about ramps. I had no knowledge whether I was like uh automatically I'd have to live in a world where classmates would have to help me up the stairs. And I often saw the act of dependence as an act of love, right? So when my mom would carry me up the stairs to my classroom, I would often see that as love. Or when someone would help me up the stairs, that would be love. So how the home of disabled children often rests on a very shaky foundation, and how we need to talk about that, right? I would also like to talk about queerness and disability, and thank you so much, Shane, for bringing this up. Um, but really, I have seen how my queerness has allowed me to embrace my disabled self, how it's allowed me to look at possibilities, and incubate on possibilities, um, and just, yeah, embrace my whole self, not only my queer self or my disabled self. Um, a lot of us grow up in hospital beds. A lot of us grow up with grief. A lot of us, exist within the four walls of the classroom, but we don't feel welcome, or we don't feel like we belong there, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Quickly, if you
yeah.
could highlight one point that you would want to share with all of us, because we are running short of time. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just take one more minute. So since I also grew up with a speech disability, I was so afraid of taking up space within the classroom, right? I was just afraid of actually asserting my voice. And during the roll call, I was even afraid of saying, yes, I'm present, right? So, adolescents with disabilities grow up with all these insecurities that are invisibilized, and support systems are there are little to no support systems, especially where sexuality education is concerned. So, I would just like to highlight how service providers, healthcare professionals, how they should be more disability affirming, and they should look at consent of the disabled child. And I really believe in, justice for disabled children, because so many of us have been invisibilized within the clinic. Our bodies have been delegitimized. So, yeah, sorry for just rambling. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we'll all agree, hearing it from people who've lived it. We all know that this happens, but then hearing it from them makes you really feel that there is a long, long way to go. And we're just happy that we've at least started this conversation today. And I know it's just the beginning of something big that we could all do together. So thank you for Shane and Noon for sharing, for being so, open and thank you. Hopefully, we'll try and find more solutions for you. My next person on the panel, Tanya. She's a member of the Secretariat and Brand and Communications Lead for the Global Partnership Forum on CSE, also an inaugural member of the Disability Inclusion Working Group for the Global Partnership Forum on CSE. Tanya, I know you're running short of time, but I quickly want to ask you two questions. But before that, when we look around, there's so much on the social media, on online learning, technology, for everything there is AI, there's this technology. But how does this virtual mirror reflect children with disabilities, especially when it comes to their own bodies, their understanding of sexuality? So my question to you is, how can media, online spaces, technology portray disabilities, impact the way children with disabilities view their own bodies and sexuality?
Brilliant.
And yeah,
And
go ahead. No, I'll come back to the second part of the question
okay,
after you finish.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this, and namaste to you all. It has been a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here and to hear the panelists share so far. I have been nodding a lot, Nu and Shane, to what you have been saying. So thank you for sharing this. As mentioned, my name is Tanya. I'm part of the Secretariat, and this question, I suppose, has been centered to my whole career on portrayal, working in communications and advertising, and how do we ensure that there is representation? And I'm saying representation beyond having one person, being one woman or one young person or one person with disability, because even using that language, what does that mean? A person with a disability, because there's a full spectrum of individuals that it could be. So whilst we're using an umbrella term of persons with disabilities, there is so much nuance within this, and I would hate for it to not be included in all the intersections which Nu was talking about, of not being one thing or another, but actually a full self. So at present, just speaking from the global perspective, 71% of all young people aged 15 to 24 are online. So whilst there are high risks potentially of seeing something which is not true, which is misinformation, which perhaps is more related to porn, which does which portrays persons with disabilities in a way which is either, as Chitra has said, is asexual, or also kind of this hyper-sexualized, fantasized version of sexuality, but not with any agency. So yes, some of these things are happening at present. And actually, within education, it is our role collectively, and I'm using this as non-formal education and formal education, to ensure that we have evidence-based and really suitable materials and content for individuals with disabilities, which are suitable for those with disabilities. So whilst I've started with the negative of what media has, and we can talk about the algorithms, which mean that young people find content which is harmful, which is out of our control unless we lobby and pressure from a global perspective. Actually, I want to talk about the possibility for a minute, because there is the possibility of using it for goodness, to really represent. So actually, from a lack of portrayal or ignoring, not having persons with disabilities because it's just too hard or it's too nuanced and there's not enough input from people with disabilities, what if they were shown, individuals like, and I would have to ask Nu and Shane so far and our panelists, do you feel seen? Are you represented in media? I would, ask that question. Are we doing enough so that people feel that? What is the possibility also? I can speak, I'm based in the UK. There are commitments by certain channels whereby there will be accessible formats. And that is just mandatory within legislation, within certain channels. What are we doing with that? How much pressure can we apply on those who are the digital platform providers to not censor content also? Because people are not finding it, individuals who need this information. So I'd say there are just a couple of things, and even referring to, I'm not sure how many of you've heard, there's something called the Bechdel test, which was dated on, if you see a woman on a film, actually, does she talk to another woman about anything bar a man? So is there real conversation? Could we have something which is disabilities related, but again, without oversimplifying? Could we have something like that about disabilities, where it's not, because sometimes it's well intended and you'll see an individual who has a disability, I'm not naming a specific one, and then they're going on a date because, that's great, it's what young people do. And then actually it's just referred to as, oh, isn't the person kind? Or isn't the person, really sweet or beautiful and lovely, rather than an individual with agency or nervousness or concerns or sexual desire or pleasure. It's positioned in a certain way. So actually, what can we be doing to do this better? I think that's an overview. And perhaps some of the things is, we all know we cannot be what we cannot see. So we need better representation. How can we normalize disability within the conversation? And it's a part of human diversity. It's not separate. How can we educate youth about consent, relationships, not just through schools, but through non-formal and out of school, and the media has a role to play. So where are the briefings or involvement of individuals with disabilities in the creation of, be it television, radio podcasts? We had a speaker as well from Sneh AI who uses AI for sexuality education. Is there anything in that with disability? If not, who's talking to them from all of you wonderful people in India to have that kind of perspective. That's my time up. I'm going to stop talking. Thank you so much. This is hopefully the start of a conversation, and
Yes.
I look forward to speaking more to you all.
Yes, I'm also hoping, but quickly, Chitrapal, if it is okay, can I, and Nu, can I ask Tanya the other question that was meant for her so that she can leave answering and giving her? Okay, thank you. Tanya, the second question. Yes, you have laid down all the challenges. You've said how the media portrays and where there are some shortfalls. So, what can we, as special educators, as caregivers, what do you think are my own barriers, or where am I holding myself back when it comes to discussing sexuality?
Gosh, this is as an individual, I'd say that a lot of our assumptions are projections. So what we feel is suitable or not suitable. So actually having more open conversations and seeing the human with whoever that is before you and meeting someone where they're at. Also having a conversation in a way that it is bringing people in. So from a cultural perspective, and working in comprehensive sexuality education, if I start talking about CSE, a lot of people may shut me down immediately. And I'm talking, so actually, what are we talking about? I very much focus on values, on love, on caring, on healthy relationships with the self, with others, for society, with being your full self, with having absolute respect for those of faith as someone of faith, and speaking about this openly. So really bringing people in, I think, is what we can be doing. And what's stopping us is sometimes we don't know. And this, I'm sure you'll talk about afterwards with educators. Educators often want training and specific training to all the diversities and methodologies which can be used, because there's this thing that you're going to get it wrong, or you could get it wrong, and then you've got parents who are going to perhaps blame you, or not all parents, but some who may criticize or question what you're doing. So we need to really have space to honestly and openly, with that intention, make mistakes and correct with kindness. So Nu, I hope if I've said something inappropriate that you will then come to me afterwards and say, actually, I wouldn't use that term because of XYZ. And I'd be like, oh, great, I've learned something. Thank you. Like we need to have that kind of culture. I'm so sorry it's so short. But yes, as I said, I hope that we'll be back, and we, as part of the new Disability Inclusion Working Group with the Global Partnership Forum, we'll be looking to, perhaps as our first item, bring all of the materials together, because there are so many materials, and actually having something which would be useful for those working in CSE, but to have more of a mindful approach to disabilities would be a good thing. I hope this will be useful, and I look forward to connecting again soon.
Thank you, Tanya. I
Thank
think
you so
meeting
much.
someone where they are is where I think we should all begin with. And yes, we've just started this conversation today, and we do have, I think, but it's very encouraging to see that there are so many professionals out there who've either had lived experiences. Some of you are in this profession and kind of willing to share and starting this, to even have this as a conversation, which is generally hushed up. So thank you so much for taking time off and joining us. So can I go back to you with the previous question of how can media and online spaces portray disability? How does it impact the way children with disabilities view themselves? Like, as somebody who's lived it, what has been your experience? And
Okay, thank you. So, I just want to start by saying that, we are people with lived experiences, but we are experts, of our own bodies, but we are also experts at our work. And definitely, lived experiences are valuable for a lot of us, for the majority of us. For example, for me, um, this is how I started my career, right? As an activist. I don't like to call myself that, but as like in the sector, in the social work sector, that's how I started my work, through storytelling, through community building. So lived experiences are also a livelihood strategy, right? And they should really be protected as such. We are not just saying our lived experiences in the air. Like, they are valuable. No, they are not just meant for awareness, but they are also meant for they can be also very valuable for monetary aid, right? That's how we make our money. Just adding that. So yeah, I really wanted to talk about how I grew up. So I've grown up in a bookstore, and like um, realizing my queer identity, I had a very heteronormative upbringing. But as I grew up, my mom owns the bookstore, and I started introducing a lot of queer events, a lot of my queer friends, a lot of queer books. Queer literature is very rich in India and globally, right? So, as well as disabled writers. So we started having these events, and mainly young adults would come to these events, my age, 27, and older. And my mom often thought, how can we introduce the concept of queerness to children and adolescents? And queerness is often seen as an adult issue. It's often seen as intimacy and who you go to bed with. But in fact, it's so much more than that. It's it's an entire movement, right? It's an entire way of life. So I I just wanted to talk about like visibility online. In our day and age, in our generation, visibility is the main thing, right? You have pride walks. There's a lot of movement. You have reels on Instagram. There's a lot of visibility. You have to be out loud and proud, right? So in that sense, how do you exactly, when you're an adolescent, even when you're a young adult, how do you maintain safety in these platforms, while also having your agency, having your decision to post on these platforms, right? So, I would also like to mention point of view, an organization. My friend Shazia is in the audience. So how they also talk a lot about people with disabilities and online visibility, how there's often a dignity of risk involved. There is a risk, but the dignity lies with you on whether you should post or not post, what you should write about, what you should not write about. So definitely, I would like to come back to, we are the decision makers, we are the experts of our own bodies. We have a say on what happens to us, what doesn't happen to us. And When online safety of children and adolescents is concerned, whether the role of social media is concerned, social media has been a magical place for a lot of marginalized individuals, especially, when you talk about Gen Z and millennials. In my generation, we found our communities online. We've built online platforms, right? A lot of communities, we have, like, for example, a WhatsApp group, which I'll talk about, which makes information accessible, because information is power. So instead of making a doctor's appointment, just like 10 seconds. Yeah, instead of making a doctor's appointment, you would ask a question on the group, whether that's personal, whether that's school related, whether that's sexual, anything. And you would immediately get a reply from someone who's like experienced the same thing. So a support system in that sense, like building support systems from within the community, right? And which are disabled and trans-led. People having, people helping those who have, disabled people, basically helping disabled people is what I really believe in, self-sustaining movements. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I think two very powerful takeaways. One is that we are the experts of our body, and then we decide what and how it gets. And the second is, I think we probably, Dr. Sangeeta would relate with me. We always think social media is not a very good space, and you have now given us a different perspective of how social media is kind of bringing some of you all together and how you're finding a voice in the community. Very encouraging, right? Thank you so much for sharing that perspective with us. I think very quickly, I want to introduce the next person on the panel, a namesake, Chitra Paul, a good friend, somebody who's been in this space. We've been together in various forums. She's also a parent of a non-speaking autistic young adult who is also a self-advocate of his own community of non-speakers, both in the country and internationally. So, Chitra, a question to you again because of your lived experience. What barriers and challenges do caregivers and educators face discussing sexuality? Most often it's a taboo, especially in the rural areas where I work with. And how do we, why are these barriers? Why are these challenges there?
Thank you, Chitra, and thank you to Enfold for inviting me to be here on this panel. So I will jump straight into the answer. So this is a very personal thing that I feel and I have experienced based on uh, my role as a caregiver to a young man who has what you would call as high support needs. And I believe that the biggest barrier that somebody like him has faced is the myth that exists around he's an autistic individual, so I'm just personalizing it and saying autistic individuals, but it holds true for all people with disabilities, is that sexuality itself is absent in this group of people, that they somehow remain children their entire lifetime, or they are considered as holy beings. And in the process, that whole aspect of sexuality just gets pushed out of the window. And the also this leads to this whole mindset about how independence and sexuality, and when we talk about independence, we mostly stress on the independence in a person with disability being able to do a certain activity. But we never focus on the independence in decision making or making choices for themselves or advocating for themselves. And so when a child or an individual with high support needs, for example, in my son's case, he can't speak. It is common to assume that a lack of independence in doing these activities also translates or makes the person incapable of experiencing sexuality, understanding anything about it, or even asserting their right to relationships, friendships, experiences, or intimacy, the whole gamut of things. And we always assume that because this individual with high support needs may come out as having low quote unquote IQ scores, we assume that they will also lag behind in the experience of sexuality or their understanding of sexuality. But what we forget to remember or fail to remember is that we always talk about how hormonal changes are behind the bodily changes that happen. And we just stress on the bodily changes, but we forget that these same hormones also impact your brain development. And the seat of sexuality is not just your body. There is also an aspect related to your brain. And an individual may have high support needs, may show lower IQ scores, but that sense of sexuality is also happening because of the bodily changes and the chemical changes that are happening in your body, and of course other aspects. I'm not the expert here, but this is what I have understood from my experience as a parent. And uh, and so what happen as a result, what do? We assume wrongly that a person with disability, especially somebody with high support needs, cannot have any connect with sexuality, and they will not understand, they will not want to experience it. And but if we, on the other hand, if we accept that sexuality is present, we also need to accept that the hormonal changes also develop a sense of sexuality and relationships, a need to be accepted. That is also part, and a sense of one's own unique self. These are also changes which happen in an adolescent. And these in turn play out in myriad ways. And this could include interactions, this could include developing friendships, and also aspects encompassing sexuality. So unless these mindsets change, we will remain stuck in the past. And what happens as a result is caregivers and educators get restricted from discussing these topics, bringing these to the fore. And as Tanya and you also mentioned, that there is a lack of representation in media. That also adds to the whole, that also becomes a barrier. And of course, in the context of a country like India, sexuality as a topic is a very taboo. And if you go into the rural spaces that Chitra you were mentioning, it becomes a moralistic compass that is used. So these are all things that end up further suppressing this important aspect of their personalities, and they actually close down opportunities for an adolescent with a disability to even think or explore about sexuality, about their own or in general. So I think that this barrier is the most important one that I have experienced. The whole act of considering the person as a child or as a holy being, which kind of just shuts all doors.
Thank you, Chitra. I think I do resonate a lot of what you said. Be it, children with special needs are asexual. They always referred to as children. They are God's children. They've been handpicked to be whatever they are or represent whatever they are. So, and adding to it, this issue of sexuality being a taboo. I remember when we were talking about masturbation, the mothers were all shocked as to what is this discussion that's going on? Why do you want to teach it to a child who doesn't need it? So, the decision that this child doesn't need it comes because they have a special need, and, we just assume. So, following on that, I think I would be more than, I think, a privilege to welcome somebody who's been a pioneer in this field, Vaishali Pai, our next panelist, a seasoned occupational therapist with over 35 years of experience in the field of childhood neurological conditions and disability. She's a founder of the Tamar Trust, a pioneering organization in Bangalore that provides holistic therapy and support children with disabilities and their families. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining. And what I would like to ask you is, with the experience of working in your NGO, and with years behind you, do children with disabilities actually express curiosity about sexuality? How do they handle attraction to the opposite gender or to their own? And do they have an identity, or are they able to understand this? And is there a program that you follow where it supports the children to exploring this in a very respectful, when Chitrapal was talking about how this is actually shut down and said, these children can't understand, don't understand, you don't need to talk about it. Why are you introducing something that they can live without? And I would like to definitely hear your experiences on this.
Namaste, and thank you so much for asking me this question. Thank you, Enfold, for having me here. Sorry, the throat is scratchy, so I hope my voice comes out well. Uh, I had prepared a whole deal of things to talk about, but thanks to everybody who has spoken before me, I don't need to repeat any of this. We all know the cultural nuances of Samahar, of India. We know the taboo subjects. We know everything. Before I answer your question, I just want to share one example. Sorry, one story. So as you said, that we have I represent the persons with intellectual disability. Most of them are moderate to severely affected, and that is, according to me, they are this invisible niche group. Okay, because we don't get to see of them as often as we would love to see them out, due to a variety of reasons. But through Tamahar, the story, we take our children out, and they're really children. I mean, I'm talking about the preteens. We take them to have lots of experiences. One particular story stands out. So we take them to a park where they all, they get to play. So there was this day when one of my teachers came back and told me, very excitedly, I need to share this with you. So the group of boys were standing together. Mind you, these are 10, 11, 12-year-olds, okay? And obviously, intellectually, they may be developmentally much lower than that. But they're all standing together. They discuss a variety of things. They discuss cars, they discuss wheel alignment, and they discuss a whole deal of things. On that particular day, they were nudging each other, and they were nudging one boy in particular, saying that, look, she looks so nice, in that pink dress, and she's gonna come to you now, so you better talk to her, right? I'm telling you, I was so excited when I heard this story, because to me, it was coming of age of my kids. And for me for all of us, when I say me, I represent Samahar, for all of us to actually figure out that how they are figuring out themselves. So forget about those hormones and those chemicals and the brain reactions and all of those things that are happening. They're actually coming out and discussing among themselves just like any other preteen would. And so we were like, wow, this is the point, and we need to catch this point. So of course, we don't go all gung-ho and start talking about sexuality, etc. We take a bit slow, but we ensure that there is a safe space for people to talk about, to discuss things. I can only talk about Samahar. I wish I could talk about the larger sector, but I know that it is not the same everywhere. I can talk about Samahar, where we give them a safe space to form extremely good, happy friendships, gender immaterial, and allow them that freedom to reach out to each other. And this goes on to talking also about our adolescents and our young adults. So it does not, I'm not only going to talk only about the preteen boys that I spoke about just now. And of course, the girls, they have suddenly started taking an interest in their appearance. Right? So what am I wearing? And I have this matching earring, and I have whatever. So they are showing us all kinds of signs. Now, how do we navigate this further is actually the task for us. It's a thin line, I feel, where we need to encourage them, but at the same time ensure that it is within safety bounds. The other thing that I want to talk about, thank you for bringing out so many things in your talk, and also Chitra Paul. So one of the things we constantly face with is the masturbation issue. And I just feel that, from our perspective, one is, of course, you start talking and preparing and looking at things much earlier than the preteen age. You start right from childhood, where you know that these children are going to grow into these hormonic stages. But most importantly, I feel that from the sectors that we come with, we should prepare parents to accept that this is going to happen. Especially with boys, masturbation is a done deal. It's up to us how to teach people safe spaces for themselves and accept it as normal. The third thing I want to talk about, this whole thing about social media. One simple example, I know I have 20 seconds, is the question about the phone. You know, we want to give all our children phones because we want to make them independent in travel. Now, what has travel got to do with sexuality? There is a lot because there's so much information. And unfortunately, we can't hold back our kids to not go to that space. So, how are we going to do that? So, that is another thing that we would like to work on and talk about, and we do so. So, I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you. I think I'm sure we could go on talking about it because you do have so much experience. I just wanted to add a couple of things from the work that we do. I think, like, yeah, I remember the shock on the parents' faces of the mothers when we first started this conversation. And luckily, I think we had Enfold's Suida kit, which kind of helped us, systematically bring this topic in right from menstruation, the human physiology. And so sometimes even the mothers weren't aware of what was this that we were talking about and why were we talking. And I remember mothers coming and telling us we had babies without not even knowing what this was all about. And from there to today, when mothers can freely discuss this, especially in our mothers support groups, I think we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And there is always this fear about social media. So when you was talking, it was really interesting as to how social media can be looked at more from a positive aspect of, forming these support groups, not just with mothers of children with disabilities, but also young adults with disabilities themselves, which can be monitored, which can be, which also gives them that freedom. After all that all of us are talking about it is inclusion. And if sexuality and not knowing what it is holding them back, then maybe we should give them that scope and that space. So thank you all so much. My last question, I think, to both Chitra, Paul, to Nu, and to Sean is how can we support these adolescents in actually forming very healthy friendships, not always romantic, but if it turns romantic, how do they navigate these romantic feelings and expressions? And I guess in some places, keep it very culturally appropriate, if I could just use the word. But before I kind of give the space to all of you, I think, Ashika, thank you for pointing out. Yes, I stand corrected. When we talk, we probably should not be using the word asexual. We probably should be using devoid of sexuality. And yes, I stand corrected. Thank you for pointing that out. Any of you, maybe Chitra, you could start, and then Sean, and then Nu.
Thank you, Chitra, again for this question. So honestly, I would actually like to also highlight how social media has been a boon for somebody like my son. He has a community similar to what Nu mentioned, and it is a group. There are multiple groups he's part of where he has fellow people with disabilities, with autism, and with non-speaking autism specifically. And so there is a sense of community that he has been able to experience because of social media. But I would also like to highlight that there is a lack of inclusive spaces for individuals with high support needs to explore these opportunities, even to form a regular friendship, a platonic friendship. There are hardly any spaces. And when I talk of these spaces, I'm not talking about segregated spaces. I'm talking about inclusive spaces where they can also connect with people who are not disabled, who may have a different kind of disability from them. But sadly, we don't have those spaces and where they can explore. And unless these spaces, physical spaces, are also available, I don't know. Like, I feel friendship is the first point, and then you go on to explore romantic or other experiences, right? So when this kind of a physical space is absent, it limits the young individual greatly. Social media also can, to some extent, compensate, but eventually the physical in-person interaction is what makes all the difference. And it actually pains me as a caregiver. It pains me that there is a lack of such inclusive spaces. And if I may say so, I would go one step ahead and say I am scared of the day that he will express a desire to explore intimate relationships or sexual feelings, because I know of no such spaces, at least in the context of India. And as of now, he does understand, and we have always had a normative conversation around sexuality. So he does understand, and he has clearly said, right now I'm not interested. But I don't know. He could say at some point that he wants to, and I'm actually scared of that moment. That is the honest to God truth. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but friendships, yes, through social media, some of this has been happening. And I've also put in a lot of effort to kind of figure out ways where he can meet people with whom he can form friendships. But end of the day, it is he who has to do it, but there are no spaces, sadly. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chitra. I think we all agree to that. There's real lack of inclusive spaces, be it education, be it relationships, or be it just places where young adolescents with disabilities could just hang out with their peers, where there is a lot of buddy culture happening, where somebody is supporting each other. So, Sean, can I get your inputs and opinions about it?
Yeah, I think it's really hard for us to talk about uh healthy friendships or even like romantic or sexual feelings without facing the root of the issue first, and that is ableism and internalized ableism in itself. Uh, but not up even apart from that, like, okay, so I think I need to say this before like we even like try to figure out like these really complex issues, that if we're not going to the root of the issue of what society is dealing with in terms of understanding disability and understanding queerness, we can't talk about other more complex issues. It's just as easy as that. We need to understand the foundation. And the foundation is that like we can't even get the language right at the moment, right? Because the language that is being created is mainly from people who are adjacent to disability rather than disabled people themselves. For example, I think there are a lot of a lot of language like special needs, for example, and the community has actually come out and already said that like it is a term that is not designed for us and not designed by us. The term that we prefer to use is either persons with disabilities or disabled persons, either whether it's person first or identity first, depending on what the disabled person actually prefers, right? Another thing that like I really want to bring up is the fact that there is so much tokenism and infantilization of disabled people, because when we're talking about friendship and we're talking about romantic and sexual feelings, how can we trust like sorry, let me rephrase that a little bit. There is no trust in the disabled person to make the decision by themselves, to make these healthy friendships, and to hold romantic and sexual feelings with other people. When there is no trust, how do we expect someone to have the autonomy to essentially go and make these relationships with other people? We are so controlled by whether it's in the medical system or by adults who are in our life or by parents or by caregivers or whoever in our lives, that we're so restricted by what we can do and by by what we can actually explore, right? There is this incredible video that was created by Course Down for the Down Syndrome World Down Syndrome Day, and one of those was one of the phrases that actually the person with Down syndrome actually said was, if you don't believe that I can do certain things, how will I do it? For example, if I go to the bar, I order a margarita, but you don't serve me a margarita, I don't drink a margarita. But the moment you serve me a margarita, I will drink a margarita. You know? So these choices, whether it's intentional or not, are already being made for us without us knowing and without you knowing, right? If I'm going if I am on a dating app, the decision is already made for me that I am only limited to a certain group just because my dating app has a photo of me in a wheelchair. That's it. I cannot give society or myself the choice of exploring outside of that. So not only do I have to hide my disability, my sexuality when I'm exploring things with society, but when I'm exploring friendships, because it creates this how do I say, really toxic environment for people who are queer and who are disabled to even seek out healthy relationships. And it doesn't even have to be romantic. The abuse that we kind of experience from romantic partners is a totally different conversation. We can't even get to that conversation if we can't even get to this conversation. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important before we actually get to how to form healthy relationships and friendships and how do we support adolescents to actually allow them to form these relationships. We need to ask ourselves, are we giving them space to be themselves? Are we giving them space to find their own identities? Are we giving them space to create their own self-worth? Are we giving them space to make the decisions and make the choices and give consent on their behalf rather than someone else giving consent on their behalf? Right? If an 18-year-old disabled person was to get married with their partner, and if that's what they wanted to, they still wouldn't be able to without losing things. We talk about marriage equality, but marriage is not equal, not for disabled queer people. We don't even have marriage for queer people, but like for disabled people, for straight disabled people, marriage equality doesn't even exist right now. So we really need to like go into the roots of what we believe actually exists and what the reality of it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank
So
you. Sorry, we're
yeah,
really running
sorry.
out of time. I want to give also new a quick, maybe
Oh,
1 or
no
2
worries.
minutes.
I think Nu
I
will
heard
also
it
talk
like
about
I think
consent.
we all heard it loud and clear. Give us the space, give us the choices, and then we can talk about it. Yes.
Yeah,
No, yes, please
go
go
for it,
ahead.
Nu.
Yeah. Quickly.
Yeah. Uh, definitely I don't know how I can follow through like after what Shane said. But definitely I would like to say how access is um really not is not like allowed. We deserve access regardless, right? We own access. We disabled children deserve the world. But at the same time, I would say that I do understand Chitra's fear of having a disabled child, with their sexuality, because often, I was looked after by my mother growing up, and she would often say, when I these terms like virginity and these terms like exploring my sexuality, she would often tell me I'm too weak to have sex, right? So physically disabled people, women, gender diverse individuals, um, caregivers look at their sexuality in a certain way, right? And there are safety issues. Let's not let's not invisibilize that. On dating apps, you're perceived a certain way, like Shane said, when you're disabled, when you're Dalit, when you're queer, when you're any other marginality, right? So how do we acknowledge that, give, like, they already have the freedom, right? We just have to provide a platform to amplify the freedom, right? It's not like giving voice to the voiceless. Actually, it's just amplifying each other's voices, right? So yeah, I would just want to add that, and moving beyond token diversity, to actually affirm our to affirm our disabled queer people and disabled children's right to, desire intimacy and community. Because I loved what Chitra said about community, about friendships, about platonic intimacy. That is really important.
Yeah.
Before romantic desires, before love, before marriage, right? All those institutions that are often inaccessible to so many
Yeah.
of us historically, right?
Yeah.
We need to also see how the disabled children support each other. And lastly, I would just like to add one tidbit of solidarity that I've experienced in my life. For example, like, we go to these like, we went to Bangkok for this conference, and I have a friend who was also physically disabled, right? And the bathroom had a tub which was very inaccessible for both of us. So they taught me accessibility for myself, how to, lay out the mat so my foot doesn't slip in the shower. And I really feel like these tools and these hacks have to be taught, right?
If we can, we are
Yeah,
really running out of time. I'm really,
yeah,
really
yeah.
sorry. We'd love to hear more of this, but I guess for lack of time, I just want to kind of I know this is just the first of the many conversations that we are going to have. A lot more, I think, as till this becomes dining table talk. That's how I look at it. It has to become day-to-day conversations. People don't need to feel, shy, offended. Please give people with disabilities the choices. Let them decide for themselves. We just have to be supportive and guide. And I just loved all that the panelists that were here, amazing experiences, and thank you for sharing it. I probably now hand it over to Enfold and Dr. Sangeeta. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Most welcome. So while we have been discussing a romance and fulfilling gender diversity, I will quickly show some of the materials. I don't know why this is happening.
There is an echo.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are Suvidha kits that we have made. It is like 5 kgs of material because it begins with early childhood and learning about your body and with the genitals drawn, right, in the body parts and the proper names for these. It begins by also talking about the clothing rules and also the touching rules. And then as the children grow up, we also have puppets of different ages for different sexes, with again, the genitals are clearly drawn in all of these materials. We have sequence cards on masturbation as well as on, changing the menstrual pad and all of that. We have more books for boys. We talk about wet dreams. We talk about having erections and managing erections. And we talk about masturbation, touching yourself. That we have also for girls, touching yourself, besides many other uh, social scripts. We have romantic feelings, how to manage them. Because this is for under 18, we don't have to talk about, as an adult, what can happen. And then there is when I feel different. So it is about when it is a non binary and also intersex is talked about. So I just wanted to very briefly introduce the audience to the Suvidha kit, and this can be obtained from our office, and you can reach out to Enfold for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta ji. We have put the mail ID. If you want to get the kit, you can always drop a mail. Now we'll open the floor for questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for being patient, for listening for so long, and for being here for the last 1.5 years, 1.5 hours. So we'll open the floor for questions now. Either you can unmute yourself and ask the questions, or you can put your question on in the chat box as well.
Hi, this is Kirti. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Kirti. Yes, I can hear.
Yes. Good evening, everyone from India. I loved the conversation that we have had today. It's really very, very insightful and helping me understand and, I would say giving me deeper insights into sexuality of children with disabilities or adolescents with disabilities. The Suraksha kit that Dr. Sanjana shared right now, I saw some books in that Suvidha kit. Now, I just wanted to understand, are those books meant for the children to read themselves?
Yes, it depends. Yes, it depends on the child. If the child is able to read, then it is for
Yeah.
them, because it does say I in all the books. It says I. Where
Mm-hmm.
needed, the parent or the teacher may support.
Okay, yeah. So that was my next question actually. Mostly children with disabilities may not be able to read and write, some of them, especially the ones with intellectual disabilities. So how do we explain
So
this to them?
we do devote a lot of the page to the drawing
Drawing,
and
okay.
to the drawings, and very explicit drawings. Very drawings, right? So
Okay,
that
okay. Understood. Thank you.
I don't know if I can add, because we've been using this for the last couple of years, what really helps is if we can train the caregivers. And, in a lot of times, the regional language then comes into picture, right? Each family
Exactly.
has a way of. So it is very, very useful when we can train the mothers on how to use the kids. And I can tell you, even in the deepest pockets of Pondicherry with the rural mothers, it's worked out amazingly for us, and how they're able to relate to the content in that kit. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank
it's
you.
available in Kannada, and we are also making it in Marathi and in Hindi, and we'll be expanding
All
the
right.
language.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any more questions?
There's one in the chat box.
from Ashika.
What is it new? Can you
Yeah,
read it?
it's okay. Okay. Ashika is saying that this could be pointed, but want to understand from anyone from the panel on how masturbation is seen from the context of a chore or activity rather than desirability and pleasure in the context of disability. What are your thoughts on that? Anybody can take that up. Any of the panelists? Anyone wants
Do you
to?
want me to talk about it?
Yeah, anyone
Yeah.
can go.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vishal.
All right. Yeah. So yes, it does start off like that, but I'm specifically again talking about severe disability, because there is very little understanding of what the biological function of masturbation really is. So it does start off like that. But eventually, as there is more maturity, there is going to be the functionality about it, and that is why it becomes very important for us to give it the respect that it deserves, and to help the person understand and navigate that space where I'm talking about private spaces, etc., where they know that they can go there and this is normal and this can happen and there can be accidents during the night, and all of those kind of things. So as long as you make it normal and allow that. So what I'm saying is, like I said before, that it's a thin line between how are you going to make people understand what they are going through when there is so little that can really be understood about it without having experienced the entire aspect of sexuality. So I feel that the normalizing that whole thing and ensuring that it does not, one point that was brought about the society. So if we do not help the person understand that this is something private, it needs to be done in private, it can really scare people off. I'm sorry, I know people are going to be up in cudgels against me, but that's the reality of our society. That's the community we live in, and we cannot forget that. So before, like Shane also mentioned, before you get on to romantic relationships or sexual relationships, first understand that this is a biological need. It can become a chore. Start off from there and then navigate your way towards actually using it functionally, within the sexual sphere.
I also want to add here in the normalization that there are children, adolescents, young people who cannot, because of their disability, masturbate themselves. So often it falls on the caregiver to do that for them, and sometimes the caregiver is of a different gender than the child who has grown up. And this was shared very recently by in one of the trainings by people. So a very simple way to understand is that if your child has an itch at the back and they can't really scratch it, would you not scratch it for them and put them out of their misery? Sexual needs are like that. If the child is not able to masturbate, but you know it is going to reduce that desire that is biological and is there and it's filling their brain and their body, then should it not be done? Yes, it should be. Yes, new has.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, no.
I just wanted to add, definitely these conversations are difficult and uncomfortable. Um, there are also um of course, when we talk about masturbation, we often view it like uh, as a chore. What I understand of the question is, when we think about straight people and reproduction. So often sex is seen as a chore rather than like for producing babies, rather than seeing the pleasure aspect of it, seeing the desire aspect of it, right? One is that. Another is I would also like to talk about, I talk a lot about pleasure. Often it's too much information, but um, yeah, I would just like to open the floor for that. About introducing accessible sex toys to your disabled adolescent, if that is something which can be discussed about. Because I definitely think, like, for me as a physically disabled person,
Yeah.
accessible
Okay.
sex toys have changed my life, honestly. So, you have like vibrators that, you can, that don't hurt your wrist, right? That are accessible for people with arthritis, with physical disabilities. So there definitely is, we should be fun around the conversation of pleasure and desire and masturbation, instead of seeing it from a very clinical perspective, instead of seeing it from a very sanitized hospital-like perspective. Definitely, we need to have more conversations in a very fun and humorous way. That is what I believe. And I would like to, like, tell everyone about one resource. So, Agents of Ishq is a resource on Instagram. On They have websites. They are very far-reaching, and they explain sexuality in a very fun, humorous way. So I definitely feel that is something you can introduce um, your child, adolescent to, instead of just, diagrammatic biology textbook kind of curriculum. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I think Chitra has something to add. Shane, is your hand also up now, or can I take your?
No,
Uh,
it wasn't. Essentially, what Nu was about to say about
oh,
said about accessible sex toys is so important, and it's not just. Sorry, let me just add this very, very quickly. It's not just about accessible sex toys being available, but it's also about the legislation allowing for sex toys to be available. So it's not just a like a one issue, like
mm,
done and dusted, right? It's multifaceted in terms of, okay, we know that we want accessible sex toys. What is the government doing about it? The government has made it illegal. How do we make it legal? So this cross movement building is so, so important, whether it's with sex toys or with sex work, because these
mm,
kids, disabled kids, are going to become adults, right? We can't just think that they are going to be kids forever. They are going to become adults. And what happens then? Are they just expected to stop sex altogether? No, that's not what's going to happen. And n- a lot of the times, they are going to seek out sex work. And that has to be a normal conversation. It can't just be, okay, sex work exists, but we're not going to talk about it because it's such a taboo subject. It has to come up in conversations, not just with our peers, not just with the kids, but also with decision makers. Because
yeah,
at the end of the day, if it's not legal, how can we access it, right?
absolutely. Thank you for bringing that, Chitra. Quickly, we are
Yeah,
already at the
just
time. Yeah,
just a
yeah, yeah.
thought that occurred to me is that
Mm,
I don't think masturbation ever starts as a chore. I beg to differ. I think it always starts with pleasure. Somebody is exploring their body, and then there's this burst of pleasure, and then you go back and seek that pleasure, right? Maybe the chore of it could be about educating the individual or the child to do this within private spaces, and take care in terms of not harming themselves, self-harming, because of certain methods that they are using and stuff like that. I don't know. This is just a thought that came to me, that masturbation is always about pleasure. It starts as a pleasurable activity and it continues to be. The minute we make it a chore, I think the pleasure just gets thrown out of the window. I don't know. It's just a thought that I had. Thank you.
That's absolutely right. And that's why children as young as 1 and 2 year olds will masturbate.
Thank you so much, everyone, especially the people who have done the interpretation, sign interpretation for us, Manisha and Deepika, and also Chitra. Thank you so much for beautifully moderating the session. And a big, big thank you to all the panelists. It was so beautiful. I'm so sorry we were not able to give you enough time. And I know that this conversation needs larger, discussion. But this is a starting point, and our next quarterly meeting would be about children with disabilities and how do they navigate safe and unsafe spaces. So we would be talking about in context of child sexual abuse and children with disabilities. So please do join the next quarterly meeting. And we also have a WhatsApp group. So we would love for you to join that group. Rohan Lavni, can you please put the group link on the chat box? Um, yes, and apart from that, we also have, as part of the Global Coalition Initiative, we also started the Nodal Officer. Many of you had, asked us that what can I do as an individual in my own space. So you can become a nodal officer in your community and start awareness and sensitization sessions on child sexual abuse. Hold small circles with children and with caregivers. You can find more details in the chat box, and we will share and sexuality education as well. Apologize for the 100. Yes. And so you can find it on the Global Coalition page. In the same page itself, you can find details about the nodal officer. And in case you still have some doubts, please reach out to me. I will share my mail ID as well here. And apologies, we did not, we had only Zoom limit of 100 people. But yeah, we forgot to cross check. So this is a mistake from our end. Usually we have more than 200 people joining us, but there have been a lot of people who have joined the YouTube link as well. But yeah, on that note, thank you so much. Have a beautiful evening, afternoon, morning to all of you. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon again in the next quarterly meeting. Thank you, all the panelists,
Thank
and
you.
thank you, all the panel
Thank you.
participants.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Before you switch off, so पूछ लो.